Step into the shadows with Paranormal M, your gateway to the unexplained. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment most importantly, and prepare for an immersive journey through our latest spine-tingling tales. We hope you're ready to question the limits of the known. They were just trying to help. This particular story occurred when I was only around 4 or 5 years old. I was home alone with one of my older siblings and his friend. They were like 13 and 14. Around this time, my Nana had recently got me into making little sculptures with clay that you could bake. At the time, I didn't understand the difference between the clay and my Play-Doh. This particular day, I was at home with one of my brothers and his friend. I'm not sure whether my other two siblings were at the time, like 12 and 16, but I do remember my parents were at work. Both had to work night shifts at the time. Though my mom would be home by like 10 or 11 p.m., my dad worked overnight and he had just left the house. I wanted to play alone in my room. It was upstairs in the loft and attic area. The closet was super cool. It was like a walk-in, but sort of sloped due to the building of the roof. The closet was also the most scariest place in the house. I grew to hate that room and eventually refused to sleep in it. Anyway, I'm playing in my room alone, making Play-Doh food, and engaging in a make-believe scenario where I have the bright idea to ask my brother to help me bake the Play-Doh. This is so my beautiful entrees can last forever. I go downstairs and I ask him to bake the Play-Doh for me. At this time, I still don't really know how to operate the oven and wasn't even really tall enough to reach the controls, even if I could preheat it myself, which again, I didn't really know how to do. I was also really scared of burning myself, so even when I had help, I usually just let them put the clay in the oven and watch from a safe distance. My brother told me no, tried to explain that my Play-Doh couldn't be baked. I, of course, knew better because my Nana baked it for me before. She didn't, it wasn't the same, obviously. I went back to begging and whining for him to do it. And he eventually yelled at me to stop and told me to go back to my room to play quietly. I stomped off, upset, went to my room and cried about how unfair my brother was being, and how he just didn't want to help me and he was so mean. I can still remember to this day, while I was crying in my room, this overwhelming sensation that someone was watching me. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I just had the uncomfortable, "you are not alone" sensation wash over me. This wasn't new. I had already given the talk by my mom, but I quickly tried to ignore it and busy myself with playing again. When it got too overwhelming, I loudly asked it to stop and to leave me alone. Almost immediately, the sensation subsided, and I remember feeling relieved. I continued on with my play for a few more minutes before my brother busted into my room yelling about how I need to listen to him and how he had told me no. Confused and a little bit upset, he was yelling at me, and I said I didn't know what he meant, and that I had just come back to the room and was playing quietly like he said to. He called me a liar, asked me when I did it. I yelled back I wasn't lying, and what in the world was he talking about? Then he demanded I followed him downstairs, which I did, and he led me into the kitchen. He pointed to the stove and then said, "Are you still going to lie now?" Still confused, I said I didn't understand. He explained that the oven was turned on and set to preheat. My gut dropped and I got goosebumps. I said I didn't do it. I couldn't even reach it. He said I must have gotten a chair Then I said I didn't even know how to do it even if I did stand on a chair. I began tearing up and swearing it wasn't me. His friend was sitting in our living room at the time, which you could see into from the kitchen. He could hear everything. He immediately jumped off the couch, flew into the kitchen, and asked me again if I really didn't do it. And I, of course, said, I absolutely did not do it. All of the color of this kid's face drained. And he looked at my brother and said we needed to get the fuck out of the house. My brother turned the oven off, picked me up, and we ran out of the house. After sitting in the center aisle of our cul-de-sac, and then talking about how it could have happened, I said I thought it was the ghost. His friend whipped his head at me and asked, what ghost? I shrugged because I didn't really know the names or really what. Just that there was always something weird going on. My brother tried to downplay it, but both decided if none of us turned it on, then someone else must be in the house. We asked to use our neighbor's phone to call our mom at work. She said to call the cops or to ask the neighbor to walk through the house with us. We asked the neighbor and, well, nothing and no one was found. So we eventually just went back into the house. Nothing else happened that night, but this particular situation scared my brother. And to this day, he refuses to even entertain ghost stories. And every weird incident that's happened after he pretends didn't happen, despite myself, my mom, and other siblings remembering those encounters vividly. While nothing really scary happened, and I genuinely think whatever energy or spirit it was trying to help me, it was really a freaky moment. More than just a dream. This happened to me when I was 18. It was just a week or so after my abuela had passed away. For context, I was still an agnostic, not just in a religious sense, but spiritually as well. It's not that I don't believe in ghosts, but, well, I don't believe in ghosts, if that makes sense. Regardless, I fully believe that this experience was a spiritual encounter, and to this day, it makes me question the possibility of an afterlife. I was dreaming. Just a dream about something random. A normal dream whose plot I can't remember. Nothing deep. When I was interrupted by a flash of bright white light that filled my entire vision so fast. Then right in the middle of it, appearing just as fast, my abuela's face was there. She was smiling at me and covered in this white light. I was so startled I was jolted awake, sitting up in my bed with an audible sharp inhale covered in cold sweat. I've never done this, not even for a nightmare. The thing about this experience was she came to me so abruptly, so unrelated to the plot of the dream, and the feeling inside that I had just by seeing her face then caused this feeling of discomfort. It wasn't this pure, comforting feeling, but this visceral gut feeling like all my primal instincts, like they were just going off, seeing something like that. And like I said, I'm spiritually, well, I guess you could say spiritually agnostic. And having told this story to family members, I can kind of taste their doubt, and I accept it. Nobody can ever be 100% certain about the possibility of an afterlife, or a visitation without having experienced it. And because it happened during a dream, most people just brush it off as such. But to this day, I know what I saw. I know that wasn't part of my dream. I know there was a force behind her smile. Looking back, the story brings me comfort, knowing I saw what I saw. but I'll never forget that feeling of uncanny fear in the moment as long as I live. I guess that's what happens when you've seen a ghost. If anyone has any stories that relate, please share. I've never heard of anything like this. Overseas unreal ordeal. This took place last month. I had planned a trip with my friends to 2 cities within the same country that were neighboring each other. Let's just call them City A and City B. The backstory is that I have no prior history of experiencing supernatural entities, be it imagined or real. In my 21 years of life, my home country, that is. In the 24 hours before my flight to City B, I received the word death twice. This was over text by the same person. I considered this an omen. Thankfully, I touched down safely in City B. My friends and I then took a bus from City B to City A. My friends and I failed to observe many Chinese superstitions when selecting and entering a hotel room in City A. We chose a very corner room, failed to mess up the arrangement of our shoes, didn't knock on the wardrobe door before opening, left room chairs empty before going to sleep, etc. It didn't help that the room opposite our corner room was a numberless room, despite it being on a high floor with a beautiful city view. It just seemed unlikely for the hotel to waste a room overlooking the beautiful view as a staff room, and more like something might have happened in that room in the past, which is why the hotel staff removed the number, perhaps. I noticed a lamp flickering at 3:08 a.m. During the last night in City A, and the very next morning when I played blackjack, a gambling game based on probabilities and luck, I lost all my money, even though I was previously having a huge winning streak of over 200 plus games. My interpretation of this was that something had signaled its presence in the room and later turned my good or neutral luck into bad luck, resulting in my financial loss. When we returned to City B, though we had a slight improvement, we again failed to observe several Chinese superstitions. On the second night, I heard what sounded like footsteps slightly past 3 a.m. in the morning coming from outside our room. The following night, I was playing blackjack again on my phone when I suddenly experienced a noticeable shift in my luck from good or neutral to bad. I heard what sounded like soft thunder, followed by a shadowy figure appearing in my peripheral vision at the corner of my room. It was at our shoe area, just beside the wardrobe. We had failed to knock on the wardrobe door once again in this hotel before opening. However, we had successfully messed up the arrangement of our shoes this time around. My interpretation was that the messed up shoes confused whatever thing I saw there. So it just stuck at the shoe area without advancing closer towards me. The quote-unquote entity appeared another 8 or 9 times in my peripheral vision, however disappearing with each time I turned my head to look at it. At the same time, I started experiencing statistically improbable losing streaks before I eventually lost all of my money once again. I proceeded to shower, which was a very bad idea in hindsight, considering what I had just witnessed. While showering, I felt as though something was watching me. There was also a sensation in my right leg twice, as though something was trying to grab it. The shower cubicle also started filling up with an unusual amount of water, such that when I opened the cubicle door, the toilet flooded immediately, which is something my friend confirmed when she entered the toilet the next morning. My interpretation of this is that something had, hoped that I would fall down while showering. The unsettling part is that the shower cubicle was poorly designed such that it was partially soundproof. So if something had happened to me, my friends who were already sleeping when I was showering would probably have only discovered me the next morning. After showering, I woke to my friends, and they requested to change the room. The next day, I tried to build up good karma, quote unquote, and actively donated to people requesting for donations every time I had the chance. However, for the whole day, I could feel around 8 or 10 times a similar sensation in my right leg being grabbed. This night, while I was waiting for my turn to shower, I took a nap. Then I heard the sound of soft thunder again. Paralyzed with fear at the thought that it might have found me once again, my whole body just suddenly couldn't move. Despite hearing my friends calling me, I couldn't respond. Just when the hotel staff, paramedics, and police crowded into the room, I slowly became responsive and regained control over my body. I agreed to go to the hospital, just to be safe. In the hospital, I heard thunder noises again. The next day, my friends had to return back to our home country. Around 2 hours after my friend left, I heard what sounded like my friends talking just outside my ward. However, I couldn't make out what they were saying. I texted my friend to ask if they were still in the hospital. They said they were already at the airport. I was transferred to a second hospital shortly after. I could sense that the second hospital was a very dirty, quote-unquote, place when I saw the entrance of the building, as it was a very old hospital, 40-plus years old. I saw many omens during the first few days, such as flipping to random pages in a book and the first word I'll be seeing is the Chinese word for death, as well as repeatedly seeing the number combination of 444, which is a very unlucky number combination in Chinese culture. Every night, I'd made it a point to arrange my slippers in opposite directions before going to sleep, just to be safe rather than sorry. One of the mornings when I awoke, one slipper was missing. Until this day, I still don't know where it went. On the fourth night at the second hospital, I believe, I met and saw in front of my very eyes the entity who I believed had been following me. A female Onryo, probably around my age. She tried communicating with me the next night when she appeared to me again, but ultimately we failed to have any meaningful conversation. Then I didn't see her for the remaining few days at the second hospital, possibly because I was surrounded by a lot of positivity during the remainder of my stay. However, on the day I was discharged, about an hour before boarding the plane, I met her again at the airport. It seemed like she was saying goodbye to me. The doctors, being doctors, claimed I was imagining things. But you can't argue that the omens, the lamp flickering, me losing all of my money in my gambling account twice, and me losing one side of my pair of shoes, especially during or near the times of the supposed supernatural encounters, like they were all uncanny incidents. So what do you think? Was this all a figment of my imagination, or did I encounter something supernatural? I'll leave it up to you to decide. I vote the latter. At least on this one. Weird experience I had a couple of days ago from a former skeptic. So a couple of days ago, some weird paranormal thing happened to me. I've been going like a whole week trying to debunk it, but I can't. A couple of days ago, I woke up at 5 a.m. to use the restroom. And things like kind of normal for me. Sometimes I like to wake up in the middle of the night to use it. I wasn't groggy or anything when I woke up. I splashed water in my face too. I was awake, so when I went back to my room to lay down, I laid on my back first. I have a memory foam bed, so when you press down on it, it sinks in, but then goes back to normal pretty slowly, so it's smooth and not in a forceful way. So I was on my back for long enough for my mattress to be back to normal again, like not having an indentation from me pushing down to get on it. And so then I couldn't sleep, so I turned to my right side. Maybe like a minute passed, and I felt the weight of a human hand push down on my bed, push my mattress along with me. It was like as if someone was trying to wake you up. Pushed my mattress and moved me along with it. I wasn't asleep yet, but when that happened, I got up so quick and freaked out. I didn't see any spirits, so we can rule out hallucination, sleep paralysis, or my mind playing tricks on me. What I felt was very real. I checked my mattress and it was moved too. My box spring was showing. Something pushed my mattress, and it wasn't a delicate push. Like it felt like a human hand on my mattress pushed down and just pushed the whole thing. It was so random too. Wish I was making this up. But I'm not, and it sounds so fake, but I feel so crazy. Told my parents and some friends. I have tried debunking it. I tried getting in my bed different ways and pushing down my bed with my elbow and turning to my side. Doing so many things to try to replicate it, and nothing. I can't replicate nor debunk it. It's been freaking me out for almost a week. I've tried talking to my smart friend who doesn't believe in the supernatural, and he told me to see if any of my bed was uneven or other things, and I tried it, and he even is stumped. It physically moved when I felt it press down on my mattress. The only other thing other than a spirit I could think of is like, well, it wouldn't make sense because it happened as soon as it turned around, but, well, I was fully awake, I wasn't asleep, I didn't have a spasm or anything. I was on my right side, and when it pushed my mattress, I felt like my left shoulder get pushed along with the force. I know some people won't believe me, but I have no way of explaining it. I've tried getting in my bed like forcefully to replicate what I felt, and I've tried pushing down first, then getting on my bed. I've tried elbowing my bed to push it down as far as I could, turn onto my side to see if I could make it happen among other things, but nothing at all has replicated that. Advice needed on spirits. Activity when I go away. When I leave my house for an extended period of time, paranormal activities happen. It scares the girlfriend shitless. I was away last week, and Wednesday night girlfriend was woken up by every entire light bulb in the house being on. Other times when I've gone, she's heard people walking around upstairs and pulling chairs. She wasn't a believer until she met me. I've met mediums, and they say I have the gift, and I feel them too. Worth to note that when I return home after an extended period of time, when I come near the house, I can feel a clear, bitter presence. It feels hostile, grumpy, and unwelcoming. We lived here for years, and moving out isn't an option now. Why are the spirits coming alive when I'm away? Is there something we can do? I do feel their negative presence affecting my mood. I've sometimes wondered if they'd leech off my energy and become mad when I'm gone. We would really appreciate some advice. What can we do? Is there something my girlfriend can do to calm them when I'm away at least? There's a crawl space in the attic which I rarely visit because the presence is so strong. It makes me afraid, to be quite frank. It doesn't help that you have to crawl and inch yourself for 10 minutes to get there. Last year there lay a dead little black bird there on its back. I don't know how it got there or died, but it doesn't help the creepy presence. Haven't removed it yet. I just got a really bad vibe from it, like I'm really not supposed to touch it. Girlfriend working in healthcare. Can a spirit have followed her to her apartment and then mine? Short story. My girlfriend and I live separately. I pass half weeks there. She lives in her apartment in Montreal. We noticed that her lunchbox, putted in the top of the fridge, dropped onto the floor of the kitchen a week ago. It was the second time I noticed it. It was weird. Maybe some shaking made it slip over time, because she's on vacation for a month. But it's kind of heavy too, so I don't know, it was weird. I spend the rest of the week at my place. I live in Laval, a city close to her. For Xmas, she came to my apartment for a couple days. She smokes outside 2 days in a row. After that, she re-entered the apartment. We both hear a sound similar, like a window or door being shut. But it is, and we're in the living room next to that window door. She used to go outside. The cat also hear it, because she fixed the door for a couple of times. So yeah, those weird things seems to be when my girlfriend is around. I game mostly in the evening for years in that apartment and never heard that sound before. I would have noticed. My girlfriend works in emergency, so she deal with death people. Maybe some spirits glued to her body and follow her. The Ghost in the Benji House. An experience I'll never forget. I'm in my 50s now, so this happened in 1989. I was attending the University of Texas. We always attended the Texas OU game. There were 4 of us staying in my boyfriend's best friend's childhood home in McKinney. His parents were out of town, and their home was used in the Benji movie. A scene where Benji runs through the white picket fence. It was a historical Victorian home, 3 stories. Each room was labeled the red room, the blue room, etc. On the 3rd floor was the creepy red room. I wanted to do a seance. The guy who grew up there didn't want me to because of the creep factor, but we did it anyway. He told us the house was haunted, but laughed it off. Nothing happened during the seance that I remember, but I heard footsteps above us all night and couldn't sleep. The following day was the game, and it was raining and cold, and my bestie and I didn't want to go. Too bad, because it was a great game and last-minute win for Texas. I was so creeped out and tired since I didn't sleep, so I climbed into the bed with my bestie since she and her guy were staying in the master bedroom. The guys left for the game, and we fell back asleep. We were on the 2nd floor and awakened by a door opening and closing from downstairs. We bolted out of bed, thinking it was the parents and we were in their bed. We hear a lady talking and say, "Hello, Mrs. T. We'll be down in a minute." We didn't get a response, but heard her coming up the creaky staircase. We both feel embarrassed and come out of the room. There's no one there. We go downstairs. Nothing. No one. We were so freaked out we left the house on foot in a drizzling rain, waited for the guys to return. Once they return, the guy who grew up there said it was the lady in the back who haunts the house. He told us stories of her always moving the photos of the piano and into another room. She also moved his mom's wedding ring by the kitchen sink on the daily. He didn't mention any of this until our experience. Turns out his mom was on the local news years earlier, discussing the history of the home and the lady that haunts it. I'll never forget this experience. Maybe not too spooky for most, but my ass was scared enough to leave that house in the rain on foot for the day. This happened 15 years ago, but it haunts me to this day. In high school, late 2000s, I had saved up all my money from summer jobs to afford a nice trip to Italy, where I'd study abroad for a bit. Since I paid out of pocket, it was important I behaved to stay on the trip, or else I could be expelled or shipped back home early, losing out on the extra money I paid. Mostly hotel fees and ticket costs, but anyway, it was the boys and girls separated, so we all got assigned roommates. We'd always be buddied up each hotel that we stopped at. I really liked my roommate. We got along well. After hitting southern Italy, we moved up north, heading to Milan. The tour bus we were on got a flat. After we changed to the spare, we were told that we had to stop by a neighboring town to change it to an actual tire needed. This town was in a tiny rural area where no one had cell reception because of how far out it was. The only access to the outside world was through a huge desktop computer in the concierge of a clearly old building that was repurposed as a hotel. We checked in and began unloading our bags. Now, once we're in our rooms, we're usually locked in with tape. If you break the tape or the seal, you get sent home for not following rules and sneaking out. So it's already night and we unpack. We're locked in for the night. My roommate, let's call her Penny. Penny and I noticed a tiny door behind her wardrobe, so we moved it together and opened the door. Think of like a Harry Potter's closet room. Like that, but inside was like much bigger. Tons of dust inside the room and dark as hell. Using our phones, we found a tiny light switch and we yanked it. All of the ceiling and floor and walls inside were painted white, and in the middle of the room was an old hospital gurney from around the 1950s. It had brown leather straps both for the wrists and for the feet. So Penny crawls a bit inside, because she's like 6 feet tall. I'm going in there. She dares me to sit in it. Being the idiot I am, I do it. Then she straps me in so she can take a picture. The entire time we're laughing and cracking up, when the gurney suddenly moves with me in it. I scream. Penny runs to set me free. As we exit toward the doorway, we notice the gurney moves again, violently toward us, and rush out of the room, seal it with the wardrobe. For the next 3 hours, we heard footsteps and the gurney slam against the tiny door. I couldn't sleep, so I said, fuck it. We opened our window, shimmied the balcony of the second floor to get to our friends in the other room as to not break the seal. We tell them what happened, and everyone is spooked. Our teacher hears us making a commotion and rushes over to the room that we were in to ask what the noise is about. We explain in full detail what happened, and Penny is as white as a ghost. She's been quiet this whole time. The teachers don't believe us and threaten to send us home first thing in the morning for our behavior. So I challenged my teacher, told her I will dispute this with the student board unless she goes and sees for herself what's going on. She then went to the room and after 2 minutes returned and said that we could stay in the room with the others. Her face was a mixture of horrified and confused. Upon checkout, we asked about the room, and the innkeepers acted confused, saying they didn't know what we were talking about. The teachers refused to speak about the incident with us. The rest of the trip was a blur, seeing as how Penny and I couldn't sleep at night the days after. Moving painting at grandmother's house. When I was very young, my grandmother had a painting that hung in the living room of her old house. This painting was of 2 women in yellow dresses at a piano, one playing while the other listened and pointing at the music, as if in the act of teaching the song. I would often sleep at her house as a child. I have countless distinct memories of seeing the figures in the painting moving at night. Not in an intelligent way, but in a sort of acting out the scene sort of way. Like how a GIF is on the internet nowadays, constant looped actions. When the figures moved, the woman playing the piano would begin to actually strike the keys and tap her foot to the rhythm, while the other woman would nod her head in approval or disapproval as she judged the performance. Occasionally tapping the sheet music too, perhaps to draw the other woman's attention to something she missed in the piece. There was no sound. I was so young and saw the painting do this so often that I thought nothing of it, simply accepting the idea that some paintings can move on their own. I remember being confused at first when Harry Potter came out and seeing Harry being astonished at paintings and pictures moving in the wizardry world. This was my first indication that what I witnessed wasn't normal. I didn't think too deeply on it at the time. Decades later, I remembered the painting and noticed that I hadn't seen it many years. I asked my now very old grandmother about it. She told me she had wrapped it in a cloth and locked it away in her closet. I jokingly told her how I was young and thought I saw the painting moving at night. She became dead serious and told me, "My dear, why do you think I don't put it up anymore? Thanks for telling me you saw it too. I thought I was crazy all these years." Sadly, I was unable to locate the painting in her closet. My grandmother is a bit of a hoarder and has many storage units filled with countless antique items. She says she thinks it must be one of the units, but that her memory's not as good now. She may have gotten rid of it and forgotten it. Wish I could find it again. Maybe when I have some free time, I'll go through the storage units and give it a good look. Something in my house mimicked my mother's voice. I'm 30 now. This happened when I was 16, and it's always stuck with me. I was playing some original Paper Mario one afternoon after school. As I was playing, I heard my mother call me from downstairs. LEDN42. LED42. Okay. So the false mother is saying his name, and his name he's posting as his Reddit title. Got it. I'm calling him Steve. Steve! I paused and called back. Yeah, what's up? False mother. Come down to the office, please. I need some help with something. Okay, I'll be right there, I said, a good, helpful son. I went downstairs to the office to find it empty. Confused, I went to the kitchen, my mother's bedroom, all the places she'd normally be. I went to the garage to find that her car wasn't even there. Went to the living room to find my father reading the paper. I asked him where my mom was, and he said she wasn't home yet. I stood there for a while processing that information before my dad asked what was wrong. I told him that I definitely heard Mom asking me for help in the office. He simply shrugged and said that he didn't know what to tell me, went back to reading his paper. So yeah, something called out to me in the voice of my mother asking for help. It's confounded me to this day. My experience with the supernatural and a luxurious home. I just met my wife a few years ago. She was living in her late mother's lavish home in a very old and upscale neighborhood in the Northeast. The home was a hoarding situation, and her mother passed in a very sad state by herself. I told my wife at the time, let me take care of getting this all cleaned up and the home repaired until you decide to keep it or sell it. On my first day by myself there, it was a very hot day and I was working in the basement. I felt this cold breeze. All of a sudden the lights started flickering continuously. I'm a contractor, and I have experience with electrical. It wasn't flickering like there was a problem. Also, the lights on the same circuit were individually flickering, which is my first interaction with whatever was in that house. I was genuinely creeped out, but continued to work, but in a different part of the house. It was almost as if something was telling me to get out of that area. This happened a few times and caught one flickering on video, actually. There were also a lot of mirrors in the home. Picture an unnecessary amount of mirrors. Sometimes I would walk past them. In just the corner of my eye, I would almost see a dark figure in the background of the mirror. And as soon as I looked, it was gone. This was a few weeks into my relationship with my now wife, and I asked her about it. She went on to tell me, well, what's been going on her entire life living in that house. Even as a kid, I refused to go into the basement because it was too scary, and I was too scared of what would happen down there. She was glad I was with her, because there were other things she told me about until the one night that creeped us both out. We were in bed watching TV, and all of a sudden we hear kitchen pots making a lot of noise as if someone was in our kitchen cooking. Then we smelled a rotten egg type of smell. It wasn't like a pot fell from a cabinet. It was continuous, and for a good 3 minutes. As I went to inspect, I could see this one light getting brighter and brighter, and the second I turned the corner, it blew the light bulb out. My wife also had 2 dogs. There would be times when we would be lying in bed, and the dogs would start barking and running around as if there were something chasing something above them. This happened at least a few times a week. We would be asleep at night, and out of nowhere, there would be barking at something, and it was always up, as if something were floating around the room. Her mother was also into Buddhism right before she died. One day out of nowhere, I felt this pinch on my shoulder and neck. It was so painful, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I told my wife, literally feels like someone who has a voodoo doll is placing a pin inside those areas. This went on for about 3 months. It was so bad that I had to visit the emergency room one day. A few days later, I was cleaning out the attic space, and I found 2 voodoo dolls of a man and a woman in an old trunk. After I found those voodoo dolls, my arm and neck significantly got better. I would joke with my mother about this house and how it was haunted, and she would just laugh and pretend it was a joke, until she came to help one day. Well, she became a believer. The second we walked in, we felt that cold draft again, and the lights started to dim slowly, shut off, then come right back on. She stayed for a little bit, but decided it was way too cold to be there, and after that, she refused to go into the home. As I was getting completed with work at the home, we decided to have an estate sale in the basement. As we were getting thousands of items ready to sell, this was when there was a lot of activity was coming out. Everything that I stated above was getting worse, and now we were hearing footsteps and laughing. It was as if there was a joke to whatever was haunting the place. Thoughts would enter my mind, and spirits wanted to be known that they were there. My wife's dreams were becoming extremely vivid. A few times she would dream about her mother, and how she had to explain that she was dead. She started talking in her sleep, almost as if she were possessed or something. There was one time she was speaking Italian in the dream, yet my wife does not speak Italian. The 2 spots that had the most activity were the long hallway into the bedroom and great room, but mainly the basement. The basement was like the heart of the spirit. Whenever you would look down the hallway, it was almost as if you'd see a person just walking across the hallway in the corner of your eye. Someone was wearing red. Wouldn't you know, getting ready for the real estate sale, I came across a red shawl. That was exactly what I saw a few times. Doors were starting to slam out of nowhere. Pictures were falling off the walls, always extremely cold. We spent a little over a year together in that house, and we moved out of it. It was almost like a vacation to be in the house that we're in now because everything's calmer and way more quiet, too. We found out a few people died inside her mother's home from her father. One was an overdose of drugs. The others were accidents. Also, the road to the house was used by Indians to travel long before settlers came. We sold it, but I sometimes have to go back there to get light fixtures and appliances, and I can tell you that I do not miss it one bit. Everyone's dreams of having a luxurious house, but to me, we're both happier with our little 1,400 square foot ranch. As soon as I step into the home, I almost feel as if someone is watching me. I get what I have to get. I leave as soon as possible, never longer than an hour. I stated before I had some pictures and videos, and wouldn't you know, I'd have the 10,000s of videos and media content on my phone. Those were the only ones that became data corrupted. Girl ghost crossing the street during an accident. This has been this tragic story in my old town about a man who was hit by a drunk driver getting into his car from a store. It was extremely sad, and this person was well known by everyone. Future politician, blue-collared business owner, just a great guy. Apparently, there was this beautiful girl who was crossing the street after this happened. She crossed over from where the accident was looking over from where that person was responding to. Most passers-by were vehicles, and they didn't realize. They were more focused on the accident, but a good amount of people stated that they saw this girl. Even the first officer on the scene thought this girl was involved in the accident and was just waiting to give her statement. When he asked her where she was, people looked at him as if he was in shock. There was no girl. The man ended up dying on the scene and the girl vanished. But what's spooky is some nights, you'll drive by and apparently you might see her walking in that area or just staring at an old accident scene. This legend has grown in my town, and more people are stating that they've seen this figure. What do you all think? My opinion is the fact that this man died right there, but who knows? Could have been an angel taking him to heaven, or maybe the people who saw have a better intuition than others. Anyone have anything similar? Do I work in a haunted fire station? Need advice. Station 4 Ghost, 9/29/22, 10 p.m. Heard a large bunch of keys rattling in the hallway leading to outside. No doors opened or closed. While sitting in the living quarters, didn't hear anyone, just keys. Looked around, no one was left in the building. Locks were all electromatic. No physical keys are used. 2/18/23, 8 p.m. Going through some equipment on the trucks. Lights blinked on-off twice. Not like they lost power, but turned off and on. About 5 minutes later, they turned off. Asked the guy I was working with why he turned them off. He said he was in the kitchen and didn't do it. 3/10/23, 11 p.m. Doors slamming shut upstairs while both of us are in the living quarters. No classes and no cars in the lot. Checked upstairs. No one in the building. 6/26/23, 11:25 p.m. I was laying in the bunk on my phone and I saw a head look around the corner. Couldn't see anything but a silhouette. No noises, but I was sure someone looked at me. 7:12, 2:30 a.m. Sleeping. Woke up to roll doors, a truck being slammed shut. Went out to the bay to look, everything was closed, and I vaguely remembered leaving one of them up. 9:12:23. 10:30 p.m., lying in my bunk. Upstairs, opening and closing. Heard doors. Heard it twice. 12:17:23. Busy night. Got to bed around midnight, and at 3 a.m. I heard doors being slammed upstairs to the point I woke up. I've been sleeping with a loud fan on because of these noises, but didn't use it tonight. Also heard the roll-up doors on the trucks being slammed shut. Next morning, the guy I worked with asked me what I was doing out in the bay at 3 a.m. He heard the same things. This station has a lot of history. A lot of firefighters have passed through these doors. Many others claim about hearing similar sounds as well. Mostly doors upstairs and on the trucks. I had many other similar experiences, but I just started logging them this past year. I just had my first ghost encounter at work. I work in a relatively modern office building with 3 floors. There's toilets in the cellar and the first floor. I always go to the first floor because they're more modern, and in my office, it's on the same floor. So I just sat there minding my own business. I was installed in the closet door to the bathroom, so I can hear when someone enters or leaves. Very shy. The door stayed shut the entire time. It's a creaking wooden door with a giant glass panel. So when you open it, you can hear the creaking noise from the glass wobbling inside the wooden frame. All of a sudden, unprompted, the urinal just starts flushing. I just wondered, no one's entered the bathroom. Maybe the sensor just got bugged about. But I didn't even finish that thought, and I hear the tap slightly open and water flowing from it. All right, somebody must have gotten in without me noticing. The tap closes gently and then silence. I specifically wait for the second of the door of it opening and closing, but nothing happens. So, I quickly finish my business. Get up and get out of the stall. The tap is still slightly open, so it dribbles just a bit. There's no paper in the bin from someone drying their hands, so I wash mine, completely close the tap, and get out. So I go back to my office, check which colleagues are in the building. It's December 29th, so naturally there's not a lot of people here today. Turns out I'm just not the only male coworker in the entire building. I'm also the only one on the entire floor. I also thought maybe it could have been a guest from one of the top people on the floor, but there's only one working on the top floor, and she's in online meeting the entire day. My paranormal experiences in my old house. In the house I grew up in, we had a few paranormal encounters. Mostly mundane things like light switches being turned on, the occasional unexplainable footsteps. Most of the people in our house weren't believers in the paranormal phenomena, but my mom and I were. A few years before we moved out, there were a few weeks where the happenings became more frequent and more intense. The first happened to my mom when she was home alone doing laundry, just before I came home from school that day. By her account, while she was doing laundry, a hat that had been sitting on a laundry pile had fallen on the ground several feet away from the pile. That apparently moved with enough force to make a noise when it fell to the ground because it kind of startled her. She turned around. When she went to pick up the hat, a penny that had been sitting on the washer flung at the back of her head. She initially thought my brothers and I were playing a prank on her, until she went upstairs and she saw me getting off the bus, and no one else was in the house. When I got in the house, she looked terrified. She told me everything that happened. We went to the basement to investigate. It was a pretty comedic scene because she had a Bible and I had a cross made from wooden spoons. Sure enough, there was no one in the basement. I saw the hat on the floor and the penny as well as the change pile of the washer where the penny came from. We stayed down there only a couple of minutes, when we heard something fall, and we both ran upstairs. About a week later, my mom was doing laundry once again. She came rushing upstairs into my room and asked if I'd heard anything, to which I said no. She asked me if I'd been in my room while she was in the basement, and I said yes. She proceeded to tell me that she was about to walk up the stairs and she heard an angry man's voice yell, "Hey!" into her ear. She dropped the laundry basket and ran upstairs to find me. After this happened, we decided to put a camera in the basement. We set up her Kindle tablet on a shelf with a stand so it couldn't fall. We turned off the lights and just left it overnight. It was an unfinished basement with no windows, so the only light was the one coming from the screen. What we saw the next day made me firmly believe what my mom had experienced, because at that point, they were just stories, and I hadn't really witnessed anything myself, or had anything happen to me. It seemed to just be her. We saw an orb of light manifest and slowly move across the top of the screen and then down. A few seconds after the orb moves off screen, the tablet gets picked up, and you can see the ceiling as if someone was holding it, and then it was just placed back down. I'll update this post if I can get the video from my mom. Another account from my brother, which we learned of a couple of years after we came moving up and discussing the events at a family get-together. My brother's, whose room was in the basement, had overheard the conversation and chimed in saying, "Yeah, there was definitely a ghost in that house. I saw the fucker. I got up to use the bathroom one night, and when I opened my door, there was a white mist in the threshold. I just closed the door and went back to sleep. I still don't believe them, though." Some ghost stories my family has told me. My entire family has had dealings with ghosts and paranormal, which from a young age has cemented a love and a belief in the supernatural. Here are some tales from my family. 1. My mom in the early 90s had a typewriter that she was typing a small 2-sentence poem on. She heard my second oldest brother crying in the other room, stood up to calm him. As she was walking back to the kitchen, she heard the sound of a typewriter typing. She goes in there, and the 2 sentences that she had written were repeated a few times, all by itself. 2. This one takes place when my mom and dad had started dating. After going to dinner and a movie, my dad decided it would be funny to prank my mom by driving past St. Patrick's Cemetery in Wadsworth, Illinois. As they were going down the road, a creature that my dad describes as looking like a bear with the face of a dog rushed out of the forest and started chasing my dad's car. My dad hits the gas in his Beretta GTZ and doesn't lose the creature until hitting about 55 or 60 miles an hour. My mom said it had pitch black eyes. A paranormal researcher said it sounded very similar to a hellhound. 3. My second oldest brother spent the night at his friend's house, and according to his testimony, woke up in the middle of the night and saw a little girl in front of the bottom bunk he was sleeping in. The little girl asked, "Do you want to play with me?" My brother kicks the top bunk and says, "Your sister's in here." His friend goes, "Dude, I don't have a sister." Needless to say, my brother didn't stay long. Has other stories from that same friend and his haunted house, but this one sticks out. 4. My sister told me once that a clock on her wall, which had a thing you flipped up and then hung on a wall so it wouldn't fall, meaning you'd have to lift it up first and then pull it out to take off the wall, and it flew off her wall and hit my then 7-year-old nephew in the head. Still has a scar from it. Something latched on to me when we moved into his house. Some years ago, my sister and I, together with my grown-up sons, decided to move together into a large old house that we had found for a ridiculously cheap price. We were so pleased with the amount of space that we didn't ask any questions. Like, for example, why was it so cheap? Well, my eldest son and I went there for our first night. It was in April, and it was very cold. The heating hadn't been switched on yet. We found out later that it didn't work at all, but that's a different story. Because of the cold, we decided to sleep in the attic. My son slept in what was going to be his room, and I was on the landing. The night I had one of the worst nightmares of my life. One of those where you pray thanks and you're back in reality after you wake up. Well, next day after breakfast, I pushed it from my mind. We proceeded to move in. A short while later, I started getting sleep apnea. I'd never had it in my life. Put it down to me getting older and putting weight on. It was quite horrifying. Constantly feared that one of these apneas would literally kill me. But I plowed on and went to work, did lots of work around the house. At some point, I began having these extremely weird dreams where I would endlessly regurgitate a light-colored, grainy, pulpy substance. It wouldn't go on and on and on until I'd finally wake up. These dreams kept on happening, but I thought they must be symbolic. Maybe I wasn't content with the new situation or the new job or something. I eventually found out that the previous owner had hanged himself in the attic, in the very spot where I had decided to spend my first night. Still didn't make any connection, as I'm a pretty down-to-earth person. Only after moving out of the house, because of the heating never getting fixed, when suddenly both the sleep apnea and the nightmare stopped, did I start to think that maybe this poor man's soul latched onto me, in hope of, well, I can't tell. I don't think I helped him move on. It makes me sad. Have you ever experienced bright, billowing mist or smoke? Over my 52 years on this earth, I've had a number of paranormal experiences, but one stands out, and I'm curious if anyone else has had a similar experience. About 6 years ago, my wife and I were renting a 3-bedroom split-level home in northern Colorado. Over the 10 years we lived in this home, we came to realize that something just wasn't right about that place. I was a hard skeptic before then, but after watching the water faucets turn on by themselves multiple times, hearing footsteps and voices, and even a growl in my ear, I was becoming less and less of a skeptic. One evening I was lying on my bed watching television, and for no reason at all, I looked up at the ceiling. Immediately upon doing so, a large white mist appeared, or what I can best describe as appearing like bright white smoke. However, this was different. It was about 6 feet long, 2 or 3 feet wide, and the edges were billowing or appeared like blowing smoke, hard. The center was just white. Didn't have the same billowing appearance. Imagine someone blowing cigarette smoke really hard. You might understand what I mean. This wasn't something I was seeing out of the corner of my eyes. I was looking directly at it, and I watched it appear out of nothing. I don't recall it having any particular shape other than it being about 6 feet long and about 2 or 3 feet wide. After about 5 seconds, it suddenly disappeared. This was just as quick as it had showed up, really. Interestingly enough, it didn't leave me in fear. In fact, I was kind of left feeling very curious about what I had just seen. Normally, I would chalk it up to humidity or something like that, but considering all the paranormal activity we had experienced over the 10 years, and the fact that it was during the winter, I just can't help but wonder. I'm really hoping someone out there may have experienced something similar. Keep in mind, I'm not what I would call a spiritual person, but I do have my beliefs in a higher power. But I'm all about rational, and I approach the paranormal with science in mind. I don't believe in, the psychic aspect, but faith tells me that this was something beyond my understanding, which overrules the skeptic side of my brain. It was truly amazing. If you've experienced something similar, please comment. Wish I could explain it, but I just can't. My two boys fought something I can't explain. Terrifying event. This happened about 25 years ago, but I still think about it on a regular basis. At the time, my two boys were around 6 and 8 years old. Happened in a small town about 20 miles from Skinwalker Ranch. This is in the Utah Basin. Having grown up there, I had more than a few personal experiences that still give me chills. But this event was beyond anything I've ever experienced before or even heard about. My two boys slept in a bunk bed in a room just across the hall from my room. I was fast asleep when I was suddenly woken up by the most intense and terrifying scream from my boys, screaming and crying out for me. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my pistol from the top of my dresser, threw open my door. And how do I say this? Running out of my son's bedroom was a 2 to 3 foot bright green creature. I have no idea what it was, but it looked to me as it was exiting the room and shot down the hallway. It made a quick turn and shot down my basement stairs. Keep in mind, all the lights were off, but this thing stood out, bright green in color with black patches on its face and body. I only got a quick look at it, but what my kids would tell me terrified me. I ran into their room and flipped on the light. Both of them, standing in the middle of the room holding their pillows. They were crying and screaming so hard I couldn't understand what they were saying. My wife came in and began to calm them down when I was looking for whatever just ran down to my basement. I searched everywhere, every corner, but found nothing. I went back upstairs and asked my boys what happened. Without going into great detail here, what they told me was horrifying. My youngest son told me that he woke up and noticed something green hunched over standing in the doorway just looking at him. He wasn't sure what it was, so he sat up, and when he did, this thing started grinning at him with big teeth, causing him to let out a scream, waking my older son. While my younger son was telling me what he had seen, my older son spoke up and said, "It looked like Darth Maul, but green." If this sounds familiar, Darth Maul is a Star Wars character. Look him up and you'll get an idea of what this thing looked like. Imagine a short, hunched-over Darth Maul. Now, I guess out of fear, my youngest son grabbed his pillow and started hitting this thing, which had now moved into the room closer to them. He then tells me it grabbed hold of his pillow and started growling at him. This caused my older son to start screaming as well. Within seconds, he joined with this pillow, hitting it over and over until it suddenly let go and turned and started back toward the bedroom door. I think it must have heard me open my door because this is when I saw it. And like I said, I didn't get the best look at it, but it was bright green with black patches and it moved extremely fast. This event had a profound impact on my youngest son, but this point forward, he would only sleep with his head covered, which always worried me. I had to sleep in their room for the next week or two before they would go to sleep without me, and only with the lamp on in the room. Sound hard to believe? I get it. Had I not seen it myself, I would have thought they were imagining things. Seeing is absolutely believing. Was it a demon, a ghost, or an alien? Or someone else entirely? I don't have a clue. But I know it was not human. And we never saw it again, though. Even today, they still kind of they draw pictures very similar to what they saw. And while they don't like to talk about it with me, their descriptions have never changed. I had an experience with something very similar when I was about 8 years old, and I sometimes wonder if it was the same thing. What I can tell you is that this is real, 100% true event, and the first time I've shared it with anyone outside my family. I don't expect anyone to believe it, but I'm telling you, it's all true.